welcome to another edition of Cognitive Dissidents. This is Jorge from Geopolitics and Empire.
I'm Parallel Mike of the Parallel Systems broadcast.
And I'm Monica of the Monica Perez Show.
All right, so we're going to sort of do Carmen Sandiego style trip around the world with what's happening. And I thought I'll kick it off with some pieces of news here. And alt media stuff. You know, this is before we hit record, we were talking a bit about this, and Lynn Alden shared a great comment. She says, analysts, podcasters, influencers, and so forth that cater to their audience don't actually respect their audience. They respect the algorithm, the money feeding the ducks. Those who are willing to challenge their audience actually respect their audience. It's a discussion. And on the heels of that, some website called The Last Refuge wrote a great piece on understanding the Fox News podcasters. And they said what all of us have been thinking. What you will notice in all of these enmeshments is a system of podcast tribalism now captured within the corporate dynamic. It says, when a podcaster is interviewing a podcaster for podcast content, you are essentially watching a circle of narcissists discussing each other. I think they're talking about a particular set. But, they're pointing out how a lot of the mainstream folks like Tucker and others have transitioned to podcasting. And it's basically, that's what I call legacy alternative media, what David Icke calls, what does he call it? The fake alternative media. And here it says, if your participation in the podcast sphere is akin to watching WWE wrestling, then you have the appropriate filter for the performances within each broadcast. And as the years were unfolding, you likely recognize the Wall Street corporate media system was going to respond to the changed and collapsed credibility environment. Well, podcasting is the 2026 iteration. Artificial intelligence is going to replace all of these voices eventually as government systems learn and adapt to the private sector information space. And then you've got, I won't play the clip, but Fox News is now warning podcasts are causing people to oppose the war with Iran and think our government is controlled by Israel. And basically it's like, let's ban speech, podcasting, right? So this is where they will be going next. And then in London, of course, the mayor calls for a disinformation unit like DHS is for Disinformation Governance Board. And I feel in the US, they're now ramping up a Disinformation Governance Board 2.0. And so I'll stop the share there to get your thoughts. But also I want to throw out that a lot of us are getting increasing heat and we're getting approached by interesting people, which I feel in many ways there's a honeypot type activity to where, if I said yes to some of the communications that I've had, they can potentially be used to entrap me, get me deplatformed, fined, or jailed. And so I feel like it's really starting to get real. So your thoughts on any of these things?
Yeah, I'll just say that, going into 2022, was it? 23, the second Trump presidency, just as it was ramping up, there was a massive push to elevate lots of small independent media voices in the alternative media, especially those that were a little bit controversial and would go down the conspiracy narrative. And that was because Trump's whole second presidency was going to be built around conspiracy, that they're trying to stop him from being put in office. They're going to take him out. And so they elevated lots of these small and medium-sized outlets and turned them essentially into full-time propagandists. I think what we're seeing now is the culling of that along with the deterioration of Trump's presidency. So they're going to pull these voices back in now, and I think they're setting a lot of them up for a mass culling. So the important thing for people like us is we have to be very careful. We've been on the right path since the beginning. We called out the Trump thing when all of those guys were pushing it. And we haven't fallen for any of the bait along the way with this trying to blame it on one group or another group. We always give a nice, decisive take. Discernment is key for me. And so I've avoided that. But like you said, Roy, there's been plenty of things that have happened, more so recently, where I've had to raise my eyebrows a bit and say, feels like I'm being led down a path by this person, or being offered something that would potentially put me in one of the boxes of these people that are going to at some point get found out as being I don't know, falling under some kind of new rule or law. So I think that's what's happening, and I think it's important for listeners to really evaluate what people have been messaging them over the last few years, what other podcasters have been saying, and you can make your own decisions on who is on the right side of things. But yeah, I personally think there is a culling coming.
And I will say that I kind of arrived at this backwards in that I kept noticing that over the years because like I was on the radio 10 years ago and you absolutely, if you ever said anything, even remotely, I mean, even just anti-Israel was considered anti-Semitic. And then all of a sudden it was okay to, I mean, it was actually required. You were pressured to say things that were, not in evidence or out of bounds or whatever, just come out very strong for anti-Semitism and, or whatever, anti-Jewish sentiment, which I think is more accurate because I've always been pretty defensive of the Syrians and other Semites. But they want you to, there was almost a requirement to do that. And I just couldn't figure it out. And finally, I had to conclude that it was a setup for identifying people that were going to be censored. And that kind of thing happens in war. And it was one of the factors that I considered in kind of predicting, like you guys did too, but that a war with Iran was coming because I saw those things and I thought, well, that seems like anti-war censorship being set up. And now, of course, I think that whatever those rules are, like you were saying about Ukraine, had passed a law like this, that it'll be retroactive. So it won't be like anybody who says anything like this is going to be in big trouble. It's like anyone who has said anything like this, which is a fundamentally not legal thing to like have a post facto law, but they do that now, and especially in taxation. So I think that that's what it'll be.
I know it's a strong point what you said. I think retroactive because again, it's this new McCarthyism, disinformation governance board 2.0, Ministry of Truth. So now thought crimes are going to have legal consequences. We can talk about this later. Zelensky just yesterday passed the anti-Semitism law for Ukraine, where you can go to jail for 8 years, right? And I guess they'll determine how bad your transgression is. But I'm having people nudge me like from all sides. People pushing. As their goal, the government is evil and we must a violent political revolution against the government. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Again, I've been open. My Christian worldview, it's a social gospel message. It's not politics. I'm non-violent. I do not believe in taking up arms against the government or people trying to mark me as pro-Russian. I'm like, all day I'm talking about how Putin is a corrupt oligarch, just like Trump, just like all world leaders, and he's part of the globalist machine. Or Iran now. People are like, hey, would you like to support the Islamic Revolution? I'm like, no, I'm not a fan of the empire, but neither do I support the Islamic Revolution.
The other empire isn't better.
And so it's just kind of like, I have to be careful now because even me tacitly confirming any of those types of things can then in the future be used to jail me. And I'm like, yeah, no. So shall we move on to the latest globalist news or what?
Yeah.
Just going to share again the screen. And I really want to share this quote. I've been reading his books. I just discovered this guy. And I think he's important for a number of reasons. Nicholas Hager, former British intelligence agent. He's still alive, 86 years old. He's written a whole host of books. And I think he's a proponent of globalism, of a certain flavor of globalism, yet he's calling out other globalism. And just because of his interesting background, I think he's someone we should pay attention to. He wrote this in 2004. I'm reading his book now, The Syndicate, The Story of the Coming World Government. And it's like he could have written it yesterday. He says, there's a pattern behind recent events. They are the result of a gradual, inexorable drive on the behalf of certain parties to a world government. The dreams of past empires are not dead, but very much alive. The drive to world government is not a past fad, limited only by the lack of knowledge of how big the world is and the ability to get around it all, but present today. It is not the fantasy of alien cultures, of fundamentalists of different hues, but has been slipped into our own democracies by people and organizations we've never really understood were in our midst. And he says these dreams have driven the creation of the U.S. as well as the European empires. They are behind the push to a united Europe and many of the recent events in the Middle East. They will be realized if we let it happen in a U.S. of the world, in the United States of the world, a world government. And so I just wanted to throw that out because there's still people, I don't know if they're morons, like how dumb you got to like, or I shouldn't use that language, or just subversive. And they incessantly come in my Substack or Telegram say, your new world order theory is wacky. There's no world government. And I'm like, it's literally in your face, literally hitting you in the forehead. And then you've got these people like this. Bilderberg just wrapped up. Get your thoughts on that. Like, there's been so little on Bilderberg. Great coverage by Dan Dix. Thankful for him and the few others that were there, but there's so little we can glean. You can basically just take, and I've noticed that no one has been talking anymore, like in past Bilderbergs. They're trying to get comments from the Bilderbergers. No one is saying anything, and just a few academic articles that just got to get this out. I put out my article a few weeks ago that a lot of people enjoyed. I got some flack. But, here's another academic. BrettonWoodsProject.org publishes this article about global governance. But there's no world government, guys. Global governance. And it says, post-World War II architects of globalism created two systems. Bretton Woods, which would handle the hard aspects of world government, and the UN, which would manage the soft side, right? Social security system and parallel institutions. And I took out these excerpts. It says, initiatives like BRICS and the New Development Bank represent efforts to create centers of power to challenge global North dominance of these same systems. The task is not to abandon these mechanisms, but to transform the global governance structure that contains them. That was my exact thesis in my article. And then Arta Moeni, who I've interviewed on TNT, he just published Coming Multi-World, a new civilizational theory of international relations. And in my interpretation, I think he also confirms it. He says multipolarity still presupposes a single integrated system. And he's talking about, okay, we're moving away from a unipolar system, but to regions, multipolar regions, which is still part of this sort of like global integrated system. And I guess I'll end here with Mark Carney's wife, who says Canada is going to shape a new world order.
I have been told of university students already being required to read my husband's now quite famous Davos speech. Of intergenerational dinner table conversations being sparked by its contents, of new possibilities opening up in its wake, of Canada being the nation that is helping to define and shape a new world order.
All right, I'll stop there. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's just lazy that they keep what's the word I'm looking for? Trotting out the phrase new world order. It's like, it's just gaslighting. They know that people jump on it, and we know that it's like a code word. So I find that really lazy. Everyone clapping. I think a lot of what's happening right now is they've got very hubristic. That is where the gaslighting comes from. Everything that happened over Easter with Trump, on literally the most holy day for Christians, he released that tweet talking about genocide in Iran and saying, praise be to Allah. Obviously, there was the AI Jesus that we saw recently where he said, I'm just a doctor. And yeah, no, you didn't. So there's a lot of gaslighting. And I think it's indicative of the times we're living through. They're trying to keep people very distracted because they feel like they're very close to some kind of finish line. And I think that finish line is the technocracy. It's the digital currencies, digital IDs. And they've got so much hubris, they think at this point we can't do anything about it. Just keep them distracted, laugh at them, gaslight them. And so I find it a little bit offensive. I tried to to push back on these people by writing more, producing more. But, the Build a Beggar meeting, most of that was behind closed doors, so we don't know what went on. But it's the same old folk. It was like Palantir, Alex Carr, people like this, the White House. And Trump actually said recently, I don't know if you guys know this, he was defending Palantir, saying that they've been massively helpful. He was praising them about how they've contributed towards Iran, just as their stock had the worst week in a year. So he's defending Palantir, and Palantir are building out the surveillance state domestically back in America. So don't know how people are squaring that circle in MAGA, but yeah.
With both the Bilderberg and what she's saying, I think there's a couple of threads to pull on. First of all, they're British. Like, he was the head of the British bank. So when she says they're going to lead the New World Order, obviously it's this, I would say it's obvious it's this Atlanticist thing. So Brexit was kind of like, it seemed to me that they were moving away from the EU to be more with the US and the North American thing. And now Europe is saying they want to kick the US out of NATO. And Trump says he wants to leave NATO. And that's something I did want to talk about more. But it doesn't, bringing Canada into it isn't a break in the system. And I noticed about 10 years ago that we started getting news about Canada. And now, like, podcasters, a lot of Canadian podcasters in our sphere and stuff, this was new. Like 10 years ago, I don't know if you have ever observed that previously, Hervoya, you were up in Chicago, maybe it's closer and you got some news from there, but I don't remember ever getting news from there. And then around that time, also on my radar was the North American Union document from the Council on Foreign Relations, which William Weld authored, but Heidi Cruz was one of the signatories. She worked on it. And in that, it talks about the North American Union, about breaking down barriers, about uniformizing or whatever, regularizing the laws by making the most severe laws the law for all. So the highest minimum wage, the highest environmental regulations. And in that, it says that there should be an supranational organization that tells all the legislators or the legislatures how to legislate. And it actually says, similar to the way the Bilderberg Group operates, in telling, I don't know if it's Europe or wherever, but in telling legislators what to legislate. And I would say just two other things. The idea that the UN is the soft power and Bretton Woods, which like has a different name or is defunct or whatever, was the hard power. That's also what I've been noticing, is that there's like this fascist behind the scenes corporate thing. Like they're talking about tolls on the seas, which we can talk about that too. I don't think that's a terrible idea. The Suez Canal charges tolls. Maybe there'd be less piracy if people could charge tolls. But that is like a kind of corporate, privatized, fascist backdoor thing, while the UN kind of soothes feelings. And so I can see that that system is still operating. And the last thing I will say is the New World Order, like, it seems to be descending into that trilateral group right now. So that's what I think is a big part when I want to talk to you guys about Iran. But putting it like that, having the three sections of the world, the lateral sections divided, allows the hegemons or like the big corporations within those groups to be protected by regulations and stuff. So you really have like no competition in that group, which is like a setup for, oligopoly or oligarchy. So it doesn't look like a world government. Still, it looks multipolar, but it functions as a world government because they all play by the same rules, which we saw in COVID.
I thought that was a useful article, and it needs to be repeated because a lot of the global governance architecture is in the background and it's not so noticeable. But the whole Bretton Woods, it's like that's the hardware. That's the computing hardware is the IMF, the World Bank, which is financing all of the digital ID projects in all of the countries of the world. And then the UN is like the software. It's like the politician that you see. And then the Bretton Woods architecture in the background is the hardware, and as you described it, fascist corporate. And in many ways, when I listen to Carney's wife, it's like they have positioned Carney as the good guy, competent technocrat, professional, and Trump is like a good cop, bad cop, and Trump is this, maniac, uncouth, and so the pendulum will swing back to Canada to lead maybe the implementation of the North American
Save Greenland
Union and all that sort of stuff. Should we then move on to Iran? I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
I just love sharing.
I don't know how you have the time to survey literally everything. Like I can just read your feeds and know that I have pretty much consumed the highlights of the entire internet.
It's my job. I love this cartoon Naomi Brockwell shares. It's two people running from government space lasers, and it says, "I don't really mind the government's new death ray because it hasn't hit me yet." It's that whole privacy of we got nothing to hide, you know. And then you've got, so here's a clip from John Mearsheimer and Daniel Davis. So this is the setup for Iran. And this is everything that I'm reading. Like the show hasn't, it's like Interstellar. So remember the scene from Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey? It's one of my favorite scenes ever. I just find it awesome, like in the traditional definition of the word awesome, where they land on water planet. It's all just water. And in the distance, you have this like 100,000 foot, like 1,000 foot wave that's coming. And I feel like that's where we're at with the Iran energy, fertilizer, all that situation. And here is Mersheimer's quick clip.
Will we, because of Israel, hit the iceberg? And that's how I see this playing out. And
how do you define in this context hitting the iceberg? What does that look like? How does it manifest?
I think that the economic damage is so great that we have a global depression that's as bad, if not worse, than what happened in the late 1920s.
Fun times. We've also got, I caught this clip, Fantastic Four. I haven't seen the movie from last year. They are predictive programming worldwide energy curfews. Unbelievable.
Sacrifices will be made. We all need to conserve power at a scale never attempted before. Quite right, Herbie. All the power. The worldwide energy curfew only works if everybody does their part to conserve electricity. Sacrifices.
So that's wild. And then you've got, of course, what's going on in Australia. But yeah, what's going on in Iran, guys, girls?
I thought that was really good, that Fantastic Four. That is precisely what I think they're going to start to move towards in the West, is some kind of energy curfews and lockdowns. And this whole thing in the Strait of Hormuz, I think they're purposely making Trump out to be the conduit of all of the chaos. And I don't know what you guys think, but it feels to me like they're trying to push him off that cliff edge now. What we've seen with the mocking of Christianity, and then you saw all of the, let's say, controlled alternative media start to turn on him. The Tucker Carlsons, Tucker's been speaking out against Trump for a long time, and he's such a broadly listened to conservative voice. Lots of people I've seen on X as well. So I think it feels like they're going to bring down the global economy, that we are going to be going towards this financial collapse moment. You had Scott Besson talking about Bretton Woods. You mentioned it, Haroy, that it's been discussed multiple times. So they're getting ready. They're psychologically seeding people for this reset, the financial reset. Obviously, in World War II, Bretton Woods happened at the end of the war. So there was big chaos before that. I think we're going to live through that chaos now. They're seeding the Bretton Woods narrative, ready to revamp the global monetary system. But that ain't going to come without some serious disruptions first. So that's where I see the next few years going. And that guy said about an economic depression. Yeah, the US economy is already turning down. The University of Michigan do a monthly survey of consumer sentiment. It was the lowest on record, lowest reading on record. So people are already hurting. Less than a month's salary in the bank for over 50% of Americans. It's not going to take much to push them over the edge. A bit of job loss and inflation with the oil price, that alone is going to crush most families. It's going to feed into the real economy. So yeah, we've got, I think this year is it. And I personally don't think we see Trump make it the 4 years. I think they're going to get rid of him at some point, switch him out, and it will be someone that comes in to mop up the mess. But the mess he'll be creating, it will be attached to him. And then when he goes, because this is what America's so great at, right? They always blame the president, then switch him out. Blame the president, switch him out. So the last time it was Biden's fault, now it's Trump's fault. When actually, I think there is a greater architecture at play. Left and right, they're all working together to engineer the reset, which we knew was coming. Everyone knew a reset I knew a reset was coming long before Trump, long before Biden. So, what's happening doesn't surprise me. But it is interesting to watch how they're engineering it and getting people to support it.
Just real quick before handing it off to Monica, I still feel I still feel it can go either way. So there have been smart people saying it can swing back. If your premise is correct, Mike, it can swing back to the left, to the Democrats, who will come in to stabilize Newsom as president or whoever, and then or Vance, right, is being prepared as to carry the baton uh, of Trump, sort of 2 or 3.0. So I could sort of see that happening as well. But just going back to one of my theses is that it's like that letter, which was never confirmed as the source of it, the Albert Pike World War III letter. It's like, but that is basically, we're watching it happen, and I feel, I've said this before, that this, and you've mentioned it, that this political Zionism that we're seeing is part of the occultocratic philosophy that's attaching itself to this fake American Christianity, and that's going to be like in the Albert Pike's letter. They're going to probably pop off nukes in the Middle East because that serves the world government agenda, and it serves to discredit the Abrahamic religions to bring in the theosophy. And so Trump his name would be attached to that whole process, and then making the world hate conservatives and all of these traditional beliefs to then bring in the whole New World Order agenda. So I can still see it swinging back, as you say, to the Dems to continue, or with Vance doubling down on Trump's legacy.
So I have a few things on what both of you guys are saying. One is, I absolutely thought, especially with the Pope Leo Trump feud, and my Twitter feed is full of accounts I do not follow jamming Catholicism down my throat. And I'm Catholic, and it's telling me all about the converts and everything. And I'm super suspicious of all that. And J.D. Vance and Candace Owens, people call Teal Catholic, which I don't know what definition of Catholic you could possibly have for him. I don't even think the Pope is really very Catholic. But they will get rid of Trump, Kirk Trump or whatever, and then bring in Vance before the end because he wouldn't really be able to win that election. But as a sitting president, in a wartime, he could have a chance. But I still think Gavin Newsom and AOC, maybe not this time, maybe next time, they're both young. But I feel like a lot of what Trump is doing is teeing up their campaign to be the savior. It depends. Perhaps it's one of those things where it just depends on how far along they are, how soon they get to end, move into the next phase. So there's that is about the succession, but about energy. First of all, the economic issue is where I long had this expression, crisis government. So they tried to do SOPA and CISPA and regulate the internet and all of that, and it didn't work. So then they had the Pulse nightclub shooting or whatever it was that just made, okay, now we have to censor the internet, and we're just going to make all this emergency legislation. And after that, ever since then, it's been what I call crisis government. They just have a crisis. And I actually heard an African leader or speaker say, let's use the American philosophy of never let a good crisis go to waste because we need to restructure our energy infrastructure anyway in the long term. In the short term, we have a crisis, but in the long term, we have an opportunity, which speaks to what the Great Reset also. But the energy thing, Mike, you had one of the really excellent points in your recent article about energy and like the exponential growth of human productivity since we've gotten like remote sources of energy, coal or whatever it was. Somebody had showed me a picture. They were trying to defend the Fed. They said, look at the impact that the Fed's increasing the velocity of money has had on human economic activity in the past 100 years. And it's just like an exponential growth. And I said, that's not the Fed, that's oil. That is the result of oil. So I think you're right that in order to deindustrialize, you need to hit the oil. I actually, it makes me laugh when they're like, everybody needs to cut back on their energy use. AI is a giant energy consumption machine. And now in this conversation, I'm starting to think that's its very purpose, because the purpose of a thing is what it actually does. And that would absorb like a flywheel the energy that we have and use and spurs our growth. But so the question I wanted to ask you guys about Iran, if you don't mind, the conversation starter more or less was, I the only time I'm usually really wrong about something is when I think what you see is what you get. So like, I think that Trump and Netanyahu bit off more than they could chew. And even though the multipolaristas are totally happy with this, is it more like these two mobsters on the corners, real New York, New Jersey stuff, started a fight with another mobster who really wasn't as weak as he thought? And the big guy says, let him fight for the corners. And however it shakes out, it shakes out. And those guys are too big for their britches anyway. So we could demote Israel, demote America. We, accelerate our multipolarista stuff, blah, blah, blah. So I was thinking maybe it was like that. And then I realized I started to see they were trying to do peace talks. They went over to Iran and they said, oh, yeah, we need like even more of a give on the nuclear stuff than you were offering. And yeah, I know Lebanon was part of the ceasefire, but we're just still going to blow it up anyway. And we have this massive energy crunch, but we're going to put a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. We're going to tell Ukraine to bomb Russian oil, whatever. So the more it's like being prolonged on purpose by those very entities, I'm starting to think like there's no element of randomness or personal corner duking it out at all. So I just wondered if you guys think there's any randomness in this. It really looks like they went too far, Israel and Trump, but was it scripted down to the letter from the beginning? What do you guys think?
I'll just say, oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll just say that I think when it comes to these things, they war game them out years and years in advance. They know how Iran's going to respond. Iran knows what America's going to do. You can argue whether it's completely scripted or whether there's some elements that are naturally occurring and whatnot. But I just think I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think the Iran leadership going all the way back to 1925, 1930 was co-opted. And I think it was the same with the theocracy. I think they were co-opted. I don't even think the guy's dead. And I don't think they took
Okay,
him
because
out
that's
in
what
a
I was
day.
thinking is that if they took out the 50 guys who were cooperating, maybe there was a deeper layer of real Iranians. But yeah, I hear you. It is surprising.
I'm a little bit cynical just because what we find out, right? We live through these times and it's very hard. And okay, you can be sometimes too cynical, but I can guarantee in 20 years, we'll know where the strings were on this one. The same way I can look back at what happened in the 1970s, 60s, 50s, and there's so much information that's released. You can say, oh, of course he was in it together. Now, yes, there are parts of it that are uncontrollable. Like I think personally that the Shah of Iran, the last one, that towards the end, he genuinely did turn on his paymasters and said, listen, I'm not going to renew the oil agreement. I'm not going to dignify myself, and I am stepping aside. I'm not going to work with you anymore. But I think we're a long way past that, Monica. Look where we are. I mean, it's over 50 years. We can see that when it comes to the big agendas, everybody works in lockstep, and any assumption that whenever anyone appears to be doing something independent, you can see that it's a fake independent. It's like a Hegelian dialectic. It's like to make it look like Sweden looks like they weren't implementing lockdowns, but they did the same stuff, vaccines. So Iran did all of that too. Why would Iran have taken part in all of that stuff if they were truly antagonistic to the West and these globalist structures? Just seems to me unlikely. So I think, and I say it's fake until proven otherwise, not real until proven otherwise, fake until proven otherwise.
I'll just add Matt Smith, shout out if he's listening. He says he listens to our podcast, but he just published an interesting piece. I'll say it's not perfect, but neither is anything anyone publishes, and it's a great thought experiment. He says narrative control and human behavior, that all of us just fall into creating narratives, and he lists a couple, and he says that we should stop doing that and just focus on what is observable, cause and effect, kind of what you're referring to, Monica. And I'm just gonna, it's a tongue-in-cheek joke, but Matt, your narratives are wrong. We should focus on cause and effect is itself a narrative. I think we could say jokingly, but and I realized reading that article intuitively, that's what I try to do. What you're talking about, Monica, is just observing, okay, what's happening? What are the consequences? And then just looking at that, then you can kind of from that form a narrative. And what you were talking about, all these signals people are paying attention to, the multipolarity, just like Israel and Netanyahu and Trump and the Iranian regime. Like, for me, I toss that off the board. For me, it's kind of looking at, okay, what are the effects? And it's going back to the global, the big picture. What are the measurable effects based on what they're doing in the Middle East, or the portrayal of what they're doing? We don't know exactly is the strait closed or not, or to what extent, but just based on that narrative, the whole world is having the Great Reset implemented. Like, for me, that's it. Forget about Netanyahu and the Iranian regime and this and that and Pakistan and blah, blah, blah. They are implementing, as a consequence of the story that they're telling us surrounding Hormuz and Iran, globally, they're bringing in, the IEA, the 10-point plan for cars every other day. Uh, they're going to force energy rationing upon the whole world. So again, it's like COVID 2.0. It's a global consequence. So that tells you that this was the goal. Iran is merely just the pretext, like COVID was, to implement the global control system. It's like as simple as that. And so I don't know what else to add.
Yeah, it can't. I agree with you. I mean, the energy thing, if it had just been a shocking, like, stronger than expected response from Iran, and then these guys actually tried to mitigate that, then I believe it. But yeah, just like with COVID, they're actually prolonging it. They're prolonging it, and so that these different policies can come into place. But I wonder, as a follow-up, if you guys think this demonstrates that Israel runs the world, or it demonstrates that it's more like a board of directors or a mob, and they have their role to play, but they're not just slapping people around. Because it seems to me that this puts their role into perspective a little bit as one of many, game-changing players, but not necessarily shot callers, because this thing is unfolding, seems like to me, in a bigger way.
I think it's above that, and I just want to just backtrack a little bit. When I say fake, I don't mean fake. I mean that there's collusion going on, because it's clearly there's real things
more or less,
happening.
yeah.
That there's an organization structure there, and maybe you don't always get told what's going to happen. You can't accept your superior. Like, I can't go to my manager at work and punch him out. That's a bad thing. My manager's going to tell me what to do, and even if I don't like it, I'm going to have to do it. I think it's kind of like that, and just whilst we're on this energy infrastructure being destroyed, it's not just in the Strait of Hormuz. I mentioned before, I don't know if I said it on Cognitive Dissidents on my own show, that the largest fertilizer facility in Australia suddenly had an outage, and they said we're going to be offline for 3 months. Russia's fertilizer facilities had drone strikes. And then just today, one of Australia's 2 oil refineries has a massive fire. It's still out of control now. Why would all of this energy infrastructure at the same time across the world be having these unexplained outages and fires and drone strikes? So clearly somebody somewhere is wanting to take these things offline. They want to take us to these shortages, and you could argue about who it is. Now, just to cycle back to your question, Monica, Israel is kind of like, for me, when people say, "Oh, it's Israel," it's kind of like looking at WWE wrestling and saying, "It's The Rock," it's mankind. It's like, I'm not falling for it. I'm not falling for it, because that's falling into the narratives. And recently they've said, "Oh, you're allowed to insult The Rock. He's a bad guy, and you're allowed to insult him." That's what they're saying about Israel, and everybody's jumped on that. But I've been here before. I've been looking at this stuff since I was a kid. I've seen all of these things come around and disappear and come back around. And so I'm just a little bit more skeptical, and I'm saying, no, I think when you play into these narratives, when you get really involved in a politician, in this guy's the good guy, this guy's the bad guy, you're setting yourself up for failure. You've got to be more discerning. And I just zoom out even further and say it's good and evil. and there is an evil entity and it's pulling the strings on that side. And they're going to want you to blame this guy, this country, this people. I think it's all a trap. I think it's all a trap. And people sometimes say that's a cop-out because they want you to name a specific person or group of people. But I think that's wrong. That's not how it works. I think evil is at play. And ultimately, I do take a biblical view in the end that, yeah, these people behind the scenes, you can call them what you want, but they're just Satan worshippers. I think that's what they are. And they pull the strings and they use finance and the media and all of those things. But it's not one group of people. You can, yeah. I think the Jewish people actually are going to be in a lot of trouble in the end themselves. And we'll see that because eventually they will too be sacrificed by the bad guys if need be. And I think history played that out too. If you go back to World War II, there was a lot of people who were seriously harmed. Lots of people in Germany had their property taken and were killed. So you can see that this evil entity will do away with the narrative when they're done with it, and the people that were supposedly the good guys will suddenly be attacked.
And I knew a lot of Black people in Atlanta. They called into my show, liberals, totally against reparations, saying that will make people hate us more. So it's quite possible that anti-Semitism legislation, so-called, if there starts to be a Gestapo-like crackdown here on free speech and stuff, that it would scapegoat them. Anyway, so you're right. Like it's not the writing is not on the wall about how it's going to shake out.
I'll just add, there was a great tweet yesterday. It said the other day, Satan is on both sides of the political spectrum. Yes. And just to your point, Mike, is that if you're going to have a world government, a world empire, you have to include every cartel faction. So it can't, you're going to have the Saudi, I mean, they're taking control of the Gulf countries, MBS, all of them are down with Neom and the line and the 15-minute cities and the Technocracy. And of course, the Zionist lobby is plugged in, the Vatican, the Masonic networks. Again, it goes back to the occultocracy. I had Pastor Crone on and he explained it. I was amazed. I was a huge fan of Stanley Monteith, the late Stanley Monteith. And he'd actually been in his home and he explained it, again, using the hand as the reference. Yes, it's the Vatican. Yes, it's the Jews. Yes, it's the Saudi lobby. Yes, it's the city of London.
Yes.
But ultimately, it's Satan, Lucifer, the fallen angel. And I guess just sharing my screen again, to your point, Zelensky just signed the law on anti-Semitism in Ukraine. You can get up to 8 years in prison, fines, and restrictions on liberty. But they're going to play this clip here from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. They're signaling this is where we're headed next. The energy, because they're going to have us shut off the lights, and while in the darkness, they're going to bring in the new system. And when they turn on the lights, hello.
By the way,
yeah,
that Zelensky thing might just be to save him. Like, I'm sure the war is quite unpopular there. It never stops. And has he had an election? Like, didn't he suspend elections? He's a dictator.
Yeah, I don't know. Or
so
it could be
it's probably a censorship element to that for his own war.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, or it could be part of the no hide stuff that some of us have covered before. But here's Powell.
Rapidly, and I think the vigilance is what you need. You just need to always know that there's another thing coming. And I think in particular, we've had all kinds of financial crises, but we've never really had a successful cyber attack on a large financial utility, let's say, or a financial institution. And that would be quite a different thing. If people are going to lose money in a certain part of the economy, we have a hugely resilient financial system now. It's more, let me say this, it's more about resilience than it is about avoiding crises. One of our former people used to say that we're in the levee building business, not the hurricane prevention business, right? So there are going to be hurricanes and they're going to come, and you just have to assume you won't know what direction or what the nature of it will be. So you want a highly resilient financial system. And we do have that, but again, nobody who's in that business will ever give you a green light. They'll always say, "Here, these are the risks, and we got to monitor."
it almost sounds like he wants a cyber polygon to happen. And why are they so obsessed with using the term resilient? It's just, that's the globalist 15-minute city term. I didn't pull it up, but on my Telegram this morning, I shared from another account, mainstream article talking about Russian hackers are going to, I think they were targeting UK bank accounts, are going to hack and rinse the bank accounts, basically clean out people's bank accounts. So you've got all these types of stories coming on board. Scott Bessent now, I think, again, these are little signals that are important. He says bank citizenship verification order is in process, so that to determine the citizenship of someone opening a bank account. Again, that's part of the algorithm ghetto. Lunduk, who's great on tech, he just noted Michigan uh, pulled back its operating system verification law, but now there's another one. They just keep coming back. They're not going to stop. A new U.S. national law has been introduced to require all operating systems to have mandatory age verification. And so, yeah, I think, just if you guys have any thoughts on this, a cyber sort of polygon type event.
I've discussed that quite a lot because obviously I talk about finance, and I think it is just one they've been setting up and teeing up for so long that if we don't have that, I'm quitting. If we don't have the cyber attack, I'm quitting my analysis because they've been teeing it up everywhere. Everybody's said it, from Klaus Schwab to Jerome Powell. There was wargaming it in Israel in 2001. And for me, I think that is the one. When that happens, that's the financial shift over from the old system to the new system. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So I think they're saving it because when they do that, you can hide so much behind a cyber attack. Listen, we're all going to be dark. There'll be no Harari, Moritz, and Geopolitics and Empire. There'll be no parallel systems, Monica Perez show. It'll be quiet. Everyone's stuck. We're all in the same boat at that point. And when it all comes back online, it could be a completely new system where you have to have digital ID just to get online. Your bank account, oh, it's all gone. The retirement account, oh, sorry, the Russian hackers took it. And at that point, you're on the digital token system. And so, listen, if they want to build a true totalitarian financial digital control grid, you are not voluntarily getting people into that. Nobody is going to volunteer for it. And I think if you do it the old kind of one step at a time, it'll take 20, 30 years to do. So I think you need a hard break at some point. And that for me is the cyber attack. So I do take it seriously. And I always say to people, someone actually asked me in my recent Q&A, how much is safe to keep in a US bank account? And I said 0. There is no safe amount to keep in a bank account. Keep what you need in a bank account, but ultimately, at some point, I don't think there'll be a warning when it happens. It'll be a rug pull moment. You'll wake up, something will happen, and that will be pretty scary stuff for all of us. It's not going to be. I mean, you got get the candles out, play some board games, you'll be fine. But I think it will have that shock factor to it. Especially if people can't, go to the local shop or access their bank account. And maybe it's not going to be total as well. We don't have to be catastrophic. We don't have to think like all the lights go out, you can't do anything. Maybe it will be located in a specific area of society. So it could be the banking sector or something like that. That's probably more realistic than a total blackout. Although, remember, they did do this in Spain and Portugal last year. And I did say at the time it was a cyber attack. Everyone said, no, Mike. And they fall for this low-hanging fruit narrative about renewables. And I said, nope, it was timed just after they were threatened by the US and obviously Israel. And then just this week, Monica, you tagged me in something that suggested it was a cyber attack. So I think, again,
Netanyahu referred to it and said, hey, Spain, you're getting out of line again. Remember what we did last time.
So, Monica, are you saying it's the Jews? Being silly.
It's always.
silly.
I got a few things to
go ahead,
say about that. So, funny that you should say that a cyber attack may be coming, because two things caught my attention as they were happening 10 to 15 years ago. One was Stuxnet, which was a computer worm, the first cyber attack ever, whatever. It was launched, I think if I recall correctly, by the US or Israel or whatever, against Iran. And Iran discovered it, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember saying, oh, this is like Oppenheimer giving the bomb to Russia. Like, oh, we're not waiting for them to develop it on their own. How are we going to have an arms race if we have to wait for that? So they gave it to them. And then all you need is that little worm, which was what it was called, a little seed to grow. So they can, whether Iran really ran with it, of course they probably did, but it doesn't matter. You can just have a false flag and then say, well, they have it. And then the other thing was that Obama, right before he left office, it was like a line in an article somewhere, but I could put my finger on it. Many times after that, he said, by the way, on the way out the door, I planted this cyber attack poison pill in something in Russia. So if there's a cyber attack, this thing will automatically go off. And it's been 10 years since he said that. So I was thinking maybe that was just fake, but it's like Chekhov's gun. Like you have to, if it's hanging on the wall, it's going to come up probably in a later scene. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is the time for that. Hrvoje, you said earlier you thought that there was a chance that nukes would be used for reasons of, manipulating the situation. Wouldn't the cyber attack be the perfect response to that? So it's horrible. It's super horrible. And I'm going to say that all of this would be kind of a limited nature, or I don't know what. The U.S. seems to be quite insulated right now from this energy stuff. I think they don't want the people to start rebelling against this war for a while, probably until they want to put in another fake leadership. But the other thing I wanted to mention was about the verifications, the bank ID, whatever. I don't know if I talked to you about this last time, but the bank ID, your bank account and your phone is your ID. You don't know it because you're willing to give those numbers out pretty easily. You use your credit card and stuff. You don't realize it, but if you're fucking with that, if you're messing with that, then they will flag you. They will find you. You don't realize because you're not actually using fake phone numbers and fake bank accounts to do anything. You're using your real ones, and that's how they're identifying you. And I noticed the Roblox, the kids thing, has implemented this elaborate age verification thing. And what people don't realize is you're thinking of it as a 16-year-old. Well, the kids have to do that now. It's not the kids that have to do it. Every single solitary person on earth has to do it. Every time there's an age verification thing, you have to do it. So that's 7 billion faces for the AI, generative AI machine. It's total surveillance all the time. And people don't understand that these things are affecting absolutely everybody. And if you want to opt out, because a lot of people have said that as soon as it comes to Twitter, I'm out. I'm completely done with this. I'm calling it the Roblox Benedict option. If you opt out, you have neutralized yourself completely from any participation in what is now the public square.
Yes. I don't have anything else to add. I was just going to add earlier to what Mike was saying. I think you put it so well. I never heard anyone put it as the WWF example. I think I thought that was the great way you put that. And yeah, I don't know what I was going to say. I bought a cheap phone and I was looking last night into installing Lineage, and boy, this stuff is not easy. So I'm going to try in the near future, because basically I got to sit down with a long period of quiet. The kids wouldn't leave me alone, and try to figure out how to install Lineage. But as you say, Monica, it's going to become extremely difficult to function. I can tell you now, here in Mexico, I've got two US numbers now. And the problem is what you just said. The Mexican bank will only accept a Mexican mobile number for your banking app. So then this means that if I don't register my Mexican number, for now, it seems the app works without using SMS, But at some point, you've said this before, they periodically check in on you and want to verify that number is...
Try to open a bank account in a name that isn't the same as the mobile number. Like, oh, can you just use my wife's number? They won't.
Well,
maybe your wife's, but they...
That was I think there's still leeway there, because, with the Mexican registry, you can register up under one name up to 10 numbers. So I think as long as that number is functioning, it doesn't matter whose name it's registered in. But
I had a different experience, but yeah.
It's a losing battle ultimately. So I just wanted to bring up again, Where were we? Just on Iran, just a few other tidbits. We know that there's been increasing rhetoric for after Iran is Turkey, says Israel. And Nassim Taleb, um, again, nobody's perfect. I'm just tired of this throwing stones stuff. Like, get out of my face. Nobody's perfect. Um, Nassim Taleb did the COVID stuff. Okay, whatever. Nobody's perfect. I'm not gonna. Then there's
Well,
no one
plus
to
take
listen
what you
to.
need. You don't have to evaluate the person's, just take what you need. Evaluate, discern the actual information.
Yeah, and so he says faster than I thought. And you have Shay Gal, who's Israel dude, and says talking about now Turkey going after uh Turkey. So is that going to happen so fast? And Morgan, who does great Substack work, who basically says all of these countries are attacking each other's 15-minute cities so that they can rebuild build back better. I thought this was an interesting comment. It showed destruction of section of Lebanon, and it says, so apparently we're playing Minecraft, and it actually does look like Minecraft. But CNN report, I mean, this is a joke. You read this. A shadowy, I mean, it's so cartoonish. It's like literally satire. A shadowy pro-Iranian group claimed a spate of attacks in Europe, but it might be
It might be a facade. Who are they saying it might actually be?
No, but you get. I mean, you got. Let me break the paywall here using uBlock Origin.
Oh, good for you.
Thank you, uBlock. Is it you? That's what's called uBlock. And you read it, and it says, "A shadowy pro-Iran group has claimed responsibility for a spate of attacks on Jewish communities, American interests in Europe. The incidents which the group posted about via social media affiliated with pro-Iranian militias include an arson attack on Jewish community-run ambulances. The catch is that the group may be a mirage." um, Calling itself Harakat, whatever, roughly translated from Arabic as the Islamic movement of the Companions of the Righteous. The group only appeared online a month ago, shortly after the U.S. and Israel launched a war. No, there are no known references, neither online nor offline, to this group before March 9th. It says there are a lot of indications that this group is not genuine, but there are strong signals that this could be associated by a foreign country. And Iran would top the list.
So it's a
of the
mirage, but it's still Iranian.
contender. Yeah, I mean, this is Operation Gladio. It's total
Yeah.
false flag. I found this meme. It's Jaws film replaced with Netanyahu. We're going to need a bigger false flag operation. And so, come on, like, what a joke. And this is why you need to read the mainstream CNN garbage. They actually tell you through their mainstream propaganda, you can they tell you the opposite of what is reality, and which they basically explain. And
I
so,
wanted to touch on
yeah,
the
I thought I'd
Turkey
get
thing.
that
Oh, you
out
can
there.
finish. Yeah.
Mossad chief says, Iran operations will be complete only when the regime is completely changed. So yeah, any thoughts there?
I mean, you can call it regime change. Do you want to go, Mike, or should I make my Turkey point?
No, you go.
Go for it. Okay. So the European, there were two articles today in the journal about Europe creating its own NATO or kicking the U.S. out of NATO. And then there were two articles yesterday that I found, either in that or the New York Times, of Trump saying he wanted to be out of NATO. And that fed completely into my idea that the trilateral thing, the Oceania, Eurasia, and East Asia thing, is coming together as the hegemonic pillars in order to protect these guys from competition mainly. But if Europe kicks the U.S. out of NATO, and the first thing they said, I looked for it, it was everywhere, this means like massive increase in defense spending. Like all of a sudden, instead of having two big allies and, the out people, you have three like enemies. So they all need massive $1 trillion defense industries. And if you do that, then the U.S. gets to have war with Turkey. They can let Ukraine into NATO without creating World War III between Russia and the U.S., which with U.S. and NATO, NATO considers Crimea a part of Ukraine. So Russia occupies that by their request. It's part of Russia now. But then if you went NATO, then that would be World War III, and you don't want that. So there are several reasons I think they might actually do that. And
I'm just gonna say that is I never thought about this before. It really clicks. It would be a technical way of you're still being able to throw Europe at Russia for
Right.
a third rodeo World War III type of situation, but the U.S. kind of sits in the background, gets off the
Doesn't
hook.
have to do
Did
it.
you guys see what Germany did recently? Banning young men from leaving for more than 3 months.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
actually, I say young men. I think it's up to the age of 41 or 42.
Wow. Wow.
So
And
that's serious stuff, right?
this folds in with the Ireland and Orban thing because Hungary, Orban was the only one kind of standing in the way of the EU and the stuff they wanted to do, especially creating a second tier to allow Ukraine in. And so von der Leyen, or whatever her name is, she now is saying, now that I'm sure the West was behind Orban's ouster, she said, well, now's the time to eliminate the veto power from EU members. So they're going to restructure that and it'll get Ukraine in. So I can see all that stuff kind of coming together pretty quickly.
Just on that real quick, Orban going out again, not that he was a perfect guy, but many people have said this, and it's just your logical conclusion that with Orban gone, that's when Brussels mask really comes off and they go full totalitarian fascist. And then, Remix News just quoted a Polish MEP, which I think he appears to be pro-liberal, globalist, Brussels, subjugate everything and everyone. Von der Leyen is quickly moving to abolish veto power. And then, of course, Alex Soros comes out and says the people of Hungary have taken back their country, a resounding rejection of entrenched corruption and foreign interference. And then, yeah, that's pretty much that. So, yeah.
But Alban's been an American guy for a long time. When he was a student, he went across to the US and he was studying in the US, and then he came back and he made that speech. I think it was about the reburial of a dissident. What was his name? Imre Nagy, and he was the leader of the failed uprising, and he was dead, and they wanted to rebury him because I think they didn't know where his remains was. So, anyways, at that point, Orban got up and he spoke to hundreds of thousands of people, and he was just a young student at the time, but he basically, it was this iconic moment. This young activist gets up and makes this very bold speech when communism was still in power, and everyone admired him. What guts, what bravery this guy had. That was Viktor Orban. And, so again, yeah, Orban's been interesting, but he's still a character in the game in a sense.
He's a cooperator for sure. I agree with you that I think there are nexus points with these people where they can be totally irrelevant, or they can cooperate and justify it by saying, well, I can kick the can or whatever. So I've definitely seen both ways with Orban. And I think, where did I read that maybe when Vance went over there supposedly to endorse him, he was just one-on-one saying, hey, you're going to have to go quietly.
And I just
Well, I would prefer Orban to still be in power. 100%.
Of course.
I think he was. I think Hungary was one of the places in Europe. There's not many places in Europe where I would say to someone, that's a place I would probably think about, Hungary. But yeah, it's going the same.
But he defended borders.
The same thing happened with Poland. Don't forget, they put Tusk back in power. So one by one, they've taken out the conservatives in Europe, and they are going towards the left. So, Haroy, going back to what you said about where America goes next, it seems that if they're already doing the switcheroo in Europe back to the left, even in the hard conservative places, it's more likely we would see that in America as well.
You just made me think. Canada, Carney, right, left, Mexico left, USA left. So you have your
Newsom,
North American Union advance. And I just wanted to reiterate what you just said, Monica, using the alternative media example, because there have people have emailed me and saying like, should I not trust this or that person based on my article, UK column? And and just in talking with people, I really want to reiterate, it's a spectrum, right? Of like the volume up or volume down percentage. It's not just because, I was a staff assistant at the UN. Am I globalist? Right? I shook hands with Gorbachev and I was too nervous to ask him about world government, of which he was a proponent of. Am I globalist? I just wanted to take those opportunities to meet these famous figures or walk the halls with the belly of the beast, the United Abominations. And then I just want to make, again, the point that it's very nuanced. And I'm just using the old media example. You can use the same for politicians. I don't think there is any political solution. Here in Mexico, you literally get whacked. You get bullets to the head if you're a politician standing up. And there can
Or
be
a journalist.
you might have luck where you choose on certain issues, you do good work, but you avoid another issue that's going to get you the bullet in the head. So I think there's middle ground, but there's a spectrum where often I'm using the alt media example. There are people that are being nudged, herded, have handlers, and some really don't realize it. Others have the thought in the back of their head, like maybe this person is handling me, but they kind of suppress it because they're reaping benefits of more followers and more money, and they don't want to
The
question
ethical
it.
glass ceiling, I call
Right.
it. You don't ask a question you don't want to know the answer
Right.
to.
So it's like they are not knowingly agents. And then of course there are people that like, okay, I shook hands and made a Faustian bargain. And then there are actual like CIA agents and I have to question even a lot of the people who say are ex-CIA and they're doing podcast stuff. I'm kind of like,
Never X.
There's no such thing as ex-CIA. Come on.
I don't know. I mean,
that's
Agreed. Any of that military stuff, Q
right.
stuff.
Look at it this way. If that was, it's like the mafia, you don't get out. If it was possible that you could be CIA, then go out and reveal the CIA secrets, they wouldn't be a very good intelligence agency now, would they? It's known once you're in one of those things that you don't do that because there's consequences for doing that. So whenever anybody says, oh, this person's X and they're revealing the truth, it's like, do you really think that their system is that weak that somebody can leave and reveal all the secrets? Come on. I
think there are two ways to get yourself killed. The one is that you really know stuff. And the other is that you're a really charismatic leader. And that's it. So those CIA guys are the one thing that you cannot.
Well, and I'll just give one
rogue.
more example. I think of people like Larry Johnson. I don't really follow him, but again, if my thesis of multipolarity actually is globalism, and the CIA is globalist through and through, right? State Department, completely one world government, CIA, all that stuff, Pentagon, it would be part of their, operation to have Larry Johnson promoting. That's his name, right? Larry Johnson. I'm getting confused now with NBA players. Larry Bird, Larry Johnson. But that they would promote multipolarity because that's the same CIA globalism that they want to see. And then what was my it's skirting me my other point? I'm forgetting now. Oh, I had a podcast guest once where they worked in some function with the government, and they were retired, and they had to stop going on podcasts because they received a visit from the government, their government. I won't go into further details. It's somewhat open source info, and was told to stop going on giving interviews and podcasts, or their pension would be shut or something like that. And that's like an example of what you guys are saying. Like a real person would have that visit by the government.
Yeah, they said they certainly wouldn't be invited on every big mainstream YouTube show out there, would they?
I can think of 3 separate situations, myself, one of them, where that message was delivered by someone who was a friend or posed as a friend. Like, I remember I was always alerted on the radio or when I was doing that show and would get a Facebook post, hey, I'm a real libertarian, longtime fan. And then I would just literally sometimes on the air say, but, and then they would say, but you are going too far on this, and then privately or whatever for your own, credibility, you should not say that. I remember that. I had a podcast guest who was telling me, the guy who's really fighting the good fight there asked me to take a back seat, and so I'm going to, just let him be in the spotlight. And then that thing was a failure. I was like, okay, that was a setup. And then I had a podcast guest who we had a great conversation. He had written books about the topic, and he was like, okay, he was supposed to come back on, and literally never answered me again. Like, completely, obviously, somebody said to him, you should not be talking to those people. Like, you've got to stop that. I mean, it was just very clear that messages get sent. And I have other examples too, but totally, that's how it works. But somebody sends that message and you should hear it.
Yeah, and I'll just add in a few, caveats. There can be examples of some of the ones that we've given where it could be a simple explanation. Maybe they didn't want to do it anymore, or they didn't see it economically viable.
Yeah, I'm not getting into the whole long thing. Those are a few that are,
self-censor.
I'm sure.
But I'm not even, maybe not in that example, but
right.
Again, there's this spectrum and nuance, and for people to, take that approach when analyzing this stuff.
Don't be paranoid. I don't like that either.
Well, we have
also, I think, I think with when it comes to podcasts and things, it's like we all have our own biases anyways, and we all have our own ways of looking at the world. And, I listen to Tucker Carlson regularly. He's put out some really good podcasts recently. I enjoy them. That doesn't mean that I'm listening to Tucker Carlson and thinking, oh, this guy's giving me completely genuine information.
Do what he says.
There is nothing in here that's going to mislead me.
It's like the
You know what I
CNN
mean?
article
So
that we just read.
I just think, like, why are people so desperate to have a hero to tell them all the truth and nothing but the truth? That's ridiculous. Nobody could do that anyways. And you should ultimately be trying to increase your own discernment. So you listen to somebody, but then why don't you go away and try and verify it and see if that person's speaking sense or not? I don't have anyone I listen to where I think, oh, I'm going to take whatever that I just heard from that guy and believe it. That's a foolish thing to do. So I just think you try and develop your own discernment. I listen to a multitude of people, and I kind of see them all as giving me a different take, different angle. And then I go away and say, okay, I'm going to try and look to see which part of that I think's resonating with what I think. And that's the way to do it. But this purity test thing is really silly.
Yeah, and just maybe to slowly wind down, a few of the minor criticisms that I've had say, will you ask us to trust you? Like, I don't ever recall I've ever said on the podcast, trust me. That's not something I would say.
On the contrary.
I don't even care about me. I didn't have my name on my podcast for many, many years until people started demanding to know who I am and what is my name, and actually do not trust me. We're here collectively trying to chronicle events. None of us gets them always correct. And so, no, do not trust anyone. And I'm like you guys. There's a lot of people I respect, and I take bits and pieces from everyone and form my own narrative. Do we any quick thought on Ireland? I haven't had the bandwidth to focus what's going on there, but also it's really fresh news, and so I kind of like want to. And what I don't like is a lot of the stuff you get is from these clips on X, and they don't source anything. There's like video clips, and I don't know what's going on.
A lot of them are from a year ago.
Right, and so I reserve my opinion until I have more information. Any thoughts there?
Well, it's definitely true. There's been big protests in Ireland. The truckers and farmers were demanding that the government reduce VAT on fuel because they're saying they're going to go out of business. They can't afford to farm. The government in Ireland, obviously, they have browbeaten the populace for a long time. So this is not an isolated incident. It's an ongoing antagonism between the two. And the Irish government, rather than acquiesce or agree to sit down and have talks, actually sent in the masked police and military, and they were attacking people. Those are legitimate videos. They were pepper spraying old women and men, and it looked extremely violent, actually. They came down hard. It was similar to the truckers' protest. They tried to make a scene, tried to create some really bad optics. But having said that, they must have been pretty worried because they have at least agreed to reduce the fuel costs by something. I think 505 million euros, a package worth of 505 million euros to support those most impacted by rising fuel costs. But when you look into it, it says there will be a 10-cent reduction per litre. That's going to save the planet, that one. 10-cent reduction, guys.
And it's
Have a
2
great
euros
holiday
per
this
litre.
on the savings. So
Out of 2 euros.
And
it says 10 cents.
Yeah, it's 10 cents out of 2 euros. So it's very small.
And
it's a few pennies.
You got to love the Spain as well. Spain was like, we're going to reduce the VAT on gasoline in Spain, and von der Leyen. And Frau Ursula Gertrude von der Leyen says, Nein, we will not You're not allowed to do that, Spain. Okay. So it's, I
Well,
mean,
they did that in Poland too, and it's actually the prices. It's weird because obviously my wife's from Poland, and they've done a price maximum. So every day the petrol, what do we call them? Petrol stations. The petrol stations get told this is the maximum you're allowed to charge for fuel, and every station across the country has exactly the same price. So you can go to any one, the same price, and so other nation. I mean, this is an
Oh, shoot, Mike, your feed is freezing.
Mike froze.
guys.
Okay, back.
Here he is.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, an interesting part of the reset for me is it does seem like they tend dials up and down based on which societies they want to have collapse and fall apart antagonistically, and which societies they want to give a bit of leeway to. Have you noticed that? Like some nations seem to have a better ride of it. Like not everyone's even in this. It's really bizarre, but I do think that there is, more signs there of some kind of reshaping, like a conscious reshaping of who's going to be the winners and who's going to be the losers.
No, that is a fascinating insight. I totally agree. And I think, again, it goes back to this idea of the World Federation. I mean, the EU itself, the EU project, you had this a huge disparity in between the economies, and you have to pull them to a balance average to be able to integrate economically, politically, socially, culturally, whatever. And so I think that's the process. What you just described is that EU model writ large, where again, that's the whole multipolarity thing, transfer of wealth from the west to the east to get this sort of average. Yeah,
I think that's part of what's happening now with the US getting egg on their face over the Iran thing and making it look like whatever so they can get in their lane, which is this, because they're having all sorts of success with Venezuela and Cuba and all of that. There's no question about that. And I think that it's in order to slow down this wheel and the other wheels get to speed up China and such.
yeah, and you mentioned, well, just a few things here. There's this scoop from Axios. U.S. suggests Cuba complicit in helping Russia fight Ukraine, and it's like, guys, I mean, let's be real here. I'm not a fan.
They're starving.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, I literally know I was going to go myself, but I know people who are coming back and forth from
It's
Cuba.
sick.
They're literally starving to death with no
No, it's
electricity,
sick.
and they're helping Ukraine. Like, what a lie on its face. And just the other news, again, many countries are bringing this in. This report from Massachusetts about limiting how far you can drive your own car to set binding goals for reduced statewide vehicle miles traveled. Again, I see this happening everywhere. It's going to happen. It's happening here in Mexico, where I forget exactly how they're going to do this. It says talks about what 15-minute concept, but you can drive every other day, and again restrict how often you can use your car. And I guess my last thought for today is David Hunter, this macro strategist, who says his new silver. He says, I realized my silver target was way too conservative, so I raised it to $1,000 an ounce for silver. And he says, I'm comfortable with my gold target of $20,000. He tweeted that 4 days ago. That's up parallel Mike's alley. I've got nothing else, but just any thoughts on that? Bob Moriarty, I just had on and says, we're going Mad Max. So, yeah.
Well, listen, if you are resetting a system, what's it going to be reset against? Because you do have all of these assets in hyper bubbles, right? So you've got the S&P 500 in the most overvalued bubble in history. And you've got housing. When my parents were younger, you could buy a house for, I feel like this is old timer talk. When my parents were younger. But yeah, they bought a house for like 2 times the average salary. Today it's 10 times. So yeah, at some point those bubbles have to burst. Whether gold goes up to 30,000, 40,000, it doesn't have to do anything. It can just stay where it is, and all of these other assets collapse 80, 90% like in the Great Depression. So that's the way that things get revalued in a reset. I don't think you have to give numbers, because ultimately 30,000 is it could be a loaf of bread. You don't know what 30,000 is in 2 years, 5 years, because the only way to keep this thing going is to print and print and print.
Yeah, barrel full
so
of
I just
cash.
think, those people that have held gold the last few years are happy. They're glad that they did it. It's definitely helped them. And actually, it is already, have I froze? Yeah, it is already giving people more purchasing power. For example, I always say in the year 2000, the average British house price was 100,000 pounds. Today it's £330,000. So people say, oh, wow, it's gone up. But if you value it in gold, it was 570 ounces of gold back in 2000. Today it's 95. So it's collapsed 90% versus gold. Yeah. So that's what's happening. That is how the reset works. Sorry, guys, I'm freezing, so I'm going to shut up because I'm jumping all over the shop here. So I'll hand it to you.
No, I think we can totally close it down. I got nothing else to say. But
I have a
you just what Mike
personal
said. Mike, when you said the year 2000, I don't know if anyone listening.
No.
Okay, there's that reference. Was this Saturday Night Live? There was some comedy show where they did a skit on in the year 2000. And this is like this would have been in the 90s. So I remember watching this as a kid. But anyways, go ahead, Monica.
Just a few personal things. Obviously, Arturo is done, so we got to go. But one sad thing and two very happy things. It's been about a year since a friend of this show and of my show, Joe Not a Fed, died. And so we are commemorating him on tax day forever. And so I just wanted to shout out to all the people who loved him. We do not forget him. And but I had two unbelievably fantastic experiences over Easter that will bring joy to everyone's hearts. I think just if they had similar experiences, very joyful. One is, and I hate the bandwagoning of the Catholic conversion, but we have a friend from China who, a young lady who decided to convert to Catholicism. So we all as a family got on a plane just to witness it. And I just feel like it's, to make a move like that when you come from a culture that doesn't want that, it's no support from that it's just it was a very joyful experience. And we got a new baby in our family. My nephew had a baby and he's so super perfect. And I worry these days because I know that so many moms and families are just like breathing in literally trillions of invisible monsters everywhere trying to kill us all. Which I don't normally believe in, but just hyper vaccination and stuff. I just feel like everybody's vulnerable. So a new baby always gives me absolute hope for humanity, joy, all of that, especially people who, still go back to nature. We were like drinking bone broth and, enjoying some time. So just a really beautiful Easter for us. And I thought I'd share a little joy.
And just to add what you just said, we know someone who just gave a young woman that just had a baby, and they asked us what we did, and it's like, look, we did what we did. You don't take us as medical advice. You do what you want, but we didn't give the vitamin K shot. Nothing. Our second kid is totally, completely, 1,000% organic. And then I guess this person also didn't take any injections or vitamin K. And then the baby developed like a rash with red spots, and then they're wondering, was it because? And the doctor, the pediatrician, is like, oh, it's because you didn't take the vitamin K. And then I do a quick search online, like I don't know much about that stuff, and it's like, oh, the red rash is a common thing with newborns, and it goes away. And I'm like, oh,
It's called newborn acne.
I'm like, come on, and what lying. Pharma.
And vitamin K is an is a coagulant. So it's just are babies like bleeding out their umbilical cords now?
I'm just thinking, like, did God create humans from dust?
Yeah, with a vitamin K deficiency.
The Adam and Eve's children didn't have. You got to have your vitamin K. When.
And who knows what's really in that stuff? Like
no, I mean, I've read the studies like you have aluminum in there, and then the other studies that say. If you give the one that pierces the skin, like the injection of vitamin K, that causes pain to the child, which can have effects mentally in the child.
PK test, they do a lot of stuff. These people didn't go that natural. They did go to a hospital and stuff, but I just feel like even being, moms who got the COVID shots, I worry about them having big bouncing babies.
Yes, we can leave it with
my son has never met a doctor or a nurse.
And is he covered in lesions?
Is he a leper?
No, he's 8 months old, and he's been around
like 40
thousands and thousands of people. We all take him everywhere. He's
really
super happy, and he never been sick. So,
wow. And
when
you guys
I'm
were short of
everything I thought I knew about the. So I was just going to say, I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about the immune system, because in if that's correct, that his immune system's worthless and it needs all of this stuff to be built up, he's never been sick and he's been around thousands of people. And
you had such a cold
he's got an
winter.
immune system. Yeah, -20. So, mother's milk and healthy parents and good clean air seems to be what your baby truly needs.
And actually, those trillions of invisible monsters everywhere trying to kill us all, like all the germs and everything. I'm a huge pro-germ person. I don't like the mRNA things running around, spewing out of people's faces. But with all the animals and fresh air and everything, I'm guessing that that baby's immune system has more data in it than like the metaverse.
Yes, shall we end then with big, beautiful babies make humans defeat down with the eugenicist globalists? I guess I'm signing off here. Geopolitics and Empire.com.
Mike at Parallel Systems over on Substack. Please do come support us.
Monica on the Monica Perez Show on your favorite podcasting platform, also on Substack.